Hey Film Boss, welcome back to Film Feature 43. Today we're going to do another 43 Facts video, this time on one of the greatest action movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark, just in time for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So without further ado, let's get into talking about the facts. So how the idea of Indiana Jones came to be was George Lucas was nervous and stressed about the release of Star Wars, so he took his good buddy Steven Spielberg down to Hawaii, and while they were building sandcastles, Spielberg confided in Lucas that he wanted to direct a James Bond movie, but at the time, only British directors could direct James Bond, so while they were building sandcastles on the beach, Lucas pitched Spielberg the next best thing, their own action-adventure film. Lucas's original idea was called The Adventures of Indiana Smith, and he got the name Indiana from his Alaskan Malamute. Said Malamute was also the inspiration for the character of Chewbacca in the Star Wars film. However, Spielberg didn't like the last name Smith, so George just flippantly threw out the last name Jones, and it stuck. Indy's outfit actually wasn't based on this guy. It was based on Charlton Heston's outfit in The Secret of the Incas, and come to think of it, all the Indiana Jones films pay a lot of homage to the movie Secret of the Incas. In the original idea for the film, Marion was supposed to be a Nazi spy. That was scrapped for Raiders of the Lost Ark, but that idea of Indy's love interest being a Nazi came back for The Last Crusade. Every studio in Hollywood turned down the idea of Indiana Jones, but on second go-around, when Spielberg and Lucas went to Paramount, they finally relented and decided to finance the movie. I think that was a pretty good idea. Harrison Ford was Steven Spielberg's first choice for Indiana Jones, but George Lucas did not want to cast him because he had already cast him in his movies American Graffiti and Star Wars, and he didn't want to get a reputation of only hiring one actor for his film, kind of like Scorsese with De Niro or Quentin Tarantino with Quentin Tarantino, so they went with Tom Selleck because of Lucas's Ford fears, and even though Selleck had done some test screening, Magnum Pl got in the way. Because of the TV show, he just couldn't do Indiana Jones. Another TV show that got in the way was the TV show Taxi, because Sallah was originally supposed to be played by Danny DeVito, but because of his TV commitments, he couldn't do the role. Once filming and production started, there were a few speed bumps, one of which led to one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. The scene where Indiana Jones shoots the swordsman was not originally in the script, but Harrison Ford, like most of the cast and crew, got food poisoning while on set, so after many failed takes, Ford said, "Let me just shoot the sucker," and Spielberg liked that idea, so that's what they went with. Funny enough, Steven Spielberg was one of the only people to not get food poisoning because while they were on location, all he ate was canned SpaghettiOs. Food poisoning wasn't the only obstacle for Harrison Ford while filming Indiana Jones. In the scene where the plane is out of control, one of the tires actually ran over Harrison Ford's legs, but due to the heat, the tire was actually a lot softer than what it would have been, so instead of completely crushing his legs, it just tore the ligaments in his knee. But an injured knee is not the only injury that Harrison Ford sustained while filming Indiana Jones. He did a lot of his own stunts, one of those stunts being on the truck scene, which is about 6 minutes of screen time. It actually took 5 weeks to film that scene, and they really drug Harrison Ford behind the truck, and he sustained a lot of bruised ribs while filming that. And when he was asked if he thought that stunt was dangerous, he said that it couldn't have been that dangerous because if it was, they would have filmed a lot more of the movie before letting him do that stunt. That wasn't the only stunt that Ford did himself. He actually ran away from the giant boulder, which wasn't a real boulder. Obviously, it was made of fiberglass and it was 22 feet or 7 meters in diameter. And Steven Spielberg was so impressed with the craftsmanship, the scene that wasn't supposed to be that long was expanded in the script because Spielberg wanted to show off the giant boulder. I said that Ford ran away from that boulder, and that's not entirely accurate because they got 5 different angles, 2 different shots apiece at each of those angles, so Ford actually ran away from the boulder 10 separate times, and during one of the takes, he fell down to his knees and got up and kept running, and Spielberg thought that that made the scene look more authentic, so they used that in the final cut of the film. Ford wasn't the only one to sustain any injuries on the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Cayenne pepper was used in the blood spray that we see throughout the movie, which irritated the eyes and nose of a lot of the cast and crew. And the assistant director, David Tomlin, had a python latch onto his hand during the Well of Souls scene, and it wouldn't let go, so a stagehand had to come and grab the snake by the tail and whip it. And once they whipped it, the snake finally did let go of Tomlin's hand.
I hate snakes, Chuck! I hate them!
Speaking of snakes, the cobra that we see shown very prominent in the film when Indy falls into the Well of Souls was trained by snake handler on set, Steve Edge, to hood at a stuffed rabbit just off the camera view. But luckily for Harrison Ford, there was a piece of plexiglass in between him and the cobra, because the cobra did spit at said plexiglass, which would have been directly in Harrison Ford's face if said plexiglass wasn't in place.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Some others on set refused to go anywhere near the snakes, so Edge had to step in as Marion's legs in the Well of Souls scenes, because Karen Allen's stunt double refused to go anywhere near the snakes, so Steve Edge shaved his legs and put on a dress to stand in for her. 7,000 snakes were used for the Well of Souls scene, many of which were sourced from local pet shops in London and the south of England. Rubber hoses were cut to length to fill in some of the gaps, along with legless lizards, which the difference between snakes and legless lizards are legless lizards have ears, some of which can be seen in some scenes of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The sound effects for the snake slithering in the Well of Souls scene was done by sound effect designer Ben Burns by sticking his fingers into a cheese casserole. And the sounds of punches that we hear throughout the movie was done by a bunch of leather jackets being hit with a baseball bat. And being Indiana Jones, there's probably a lot of leather jackets present. Snakes weren't the only thing hiding in the Well of Souls. Mixed in with a lot of the hieroglyphics, and it's a pretty well-known fact, you can see R2-D2 and C-3PO from Star Wars mixed in because George Lucas loves synergy. Snakes were not the only creepy crawlies on set. Raiders of the Lost Ark was Dr. Octopus himself, Alfred Molina's first film, and his first day on set, the crew covered him in tarantulas.
Steven says, Alfred, you don't have a thing about spiders, do you?
Oddly enough, none of the tarantulas would move until a female was present.
So we start shooting, and Steven says, they look like they're asleep. Can we get them to move around? And the guys are spraying little air things at them to try and they're not moving. They're terrified. So this guy says, well, they'll only move if I put a female among them. So Steven goes, well, do it.
And then once a female was presented to the males, it was off to the races. And speaking of animal actors hitting their cue, to get the monkey to do a Nazi salute, a grape was dangled from a fishing line just out of view, and it took over 50 takes to get the monkey actually giving the salute. And all the chirps and cheeps we hear from the monkey was actually done by voice actor Frank Welker, which gave him some practice voicing a primate, because he would later go on to voice a Boo in the 1992 film Aladdin. Another huge scene in the Raiders of the Lost Ark was the actual opening of the Ark. Kind of wraps everything up. The spirits that we see coming out of the Ark was actually mannequins that were filmed underwater with a fuzzy camera lens. And due to the graphic nature of the deaths of the bad guys, Raiders was almost given an R rating, specifically due to Belloq's death, so they put digital flames over his head, so it was less graphic, and the MPAA was appeased. And speaking of gruesome deaths, Tao's melting head was actually done by taking a plaster and gelatin mold of Ron Lacey's head and putting it in front of a heat lamp and speeding up the film. And Dietrich's crushed head was done by a hollow model of the actor's head with all the air being sucked out of it, and that film was also sped up. And the Ark killing all of the bad guys who look upon it is actually a reference to the Bible in 1 Samuel 6:19, where all of the men of Beth Shemesh were smote by looking upon the Ark, hence why Indy and Marion are spared by closing their eyes.
Marion, don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Marion. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
Let's end the video with a few post-production facts. Indiana Jones's whip was sold in 1999 for $43,000, and his hat and jacket are in the Smithsonian. And for the German release of the film, a lot of the Nazis' German had to be redubbed by actual German speakers because the Nazis were played by English-speaking people who didn't speak German, so they had American accents, and some of the lines were just completely wrong when translated into German. But that's my 43 facts on Raiders of the Lost Ark. Let me know what you think down below, if there's any you didn't know. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.